Chat history. We are going to have a discussion about Palestine and Palestinian rights to the land. Is that okay? Sure, I'd be happy to discuss the topic of Palestine and Palestinian rights. What specific aspects or questions would you like to explore within this discussion? The situation in Palestine is complex and deeply rooted in history, politics, and conflicting narratives. At its core, it revolves around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which primarily concerns the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, where both Israelis and Palestinians lay claim. Here's a basic overview. 1. Historical context. The region historically known as Palestine has been home to various peoples, including ancient Hebrews, Canaanites, Philistines, and others. In more recent history, the area was under Ottoman rule until World War I, when it fell under British control through the League of Nations mandate. 2. Partition and creation of Israel. After World War II and the Holocaust, Jewish aspirations for a homeland intensified. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition plan to create separate Jewish and Arab states in Palestine. The Jewish leadership accepted, but the Arab leadership rejected it, leading to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. This war resulted in the establishment of the State of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, creating a refugee crisis. 3. Occupation and conflict. In 1967, Israel gained control over the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and other territories in the Six-Day War. These areas have been under Israeli military occupation since then, leading to ongoing tensions, clashes, and a cycle of violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Settlements built by Israelis in these occupied territories are a major point of contention, as they are considered illegal under international law. 4. Peace process and negotiations. Numerous attempts have been made to broker peace between Israelis and Palestinians, including the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, which aimed to establish a framework for a two-state solution. However, these efforts have faced significant challenges, including disagreements over borders, settlements, security, and the status of Jerusalem. 5. Human rights concerns. Human rights organizations have raised concerns about various issues, including restrictions on movement, access to resources, house demolitions, detention of Palestinians, and violence against civilians on both sides. Palestinians in the occupied territories live with limited autonomy and face economic hardships, while Israelis in bordering areas deal with security threats and periodic conflicts. 6. International perspectives. The international community has varied opinions and approaches toward the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Some support a two-state solution, where Israel and Palestine exist peacefully side by side, while others advocate for different solutions or focus on human rights and justice for Palestinians. The situation remains highly contentious, with deep emotional and historical significance for both Israelis and Palestinians. Discussions and attempts to find a resolution continue to be a focal point in international relations and diplomacy. Okay, thanks. First question: I don't see any Palestine really in there. You mentioned the Ottoman Empire rule, but have Palestinians ever governed or ruled the land? The term Palestinians historically refers to the various peoples who have inhabited the region known as Palestine, rather than a sovereign governing entity. Before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the area known as Palestine was under Ottoman rule for centuries. During this time, the population consisted of diverse ethnic and religious groups, including Arabs, Jews, Christians, and others. The concept of a distinct Palestinian national identity began to gain prominence in the 20th century, particularly in response to increasing Jewish immigration and the aspirations for self-determination. However, Palestine didn't have autonomous self-governance under Ottoman rule or during the subsequent British Mandate period. The idea of a specifically Palestinian national identity developed gradually, shaped by cultural, historical, and social factors, as well as the shared experience of living in the same geographical area. The Palestinian national movement emerged as a response to political and social changes in the region, leading to the call for Palestinian self-determination and statehood. The absence of a historically independent Palestinian state doesn't negate the aspirations of many Palestinians for self-governance and recognition of their rights within the region they historically inhabited. The struggle for Palestinian rights and statehood remains a central aspect of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Okay, so you are distinguishing between rule and inhabitation. Absolutely. Inhabitation and governance are distinct concepts. Historically, the region known as Palestine has been inhabited by various groups, including Canaanites, Philistines, Jews, Arabs, and others. These groups lived in the area, established communities, and contributed to the cultural, social, and historical fabric of the region. However, when discussing governance or sovereignty, it's important to differentiate between the presence of a population in a particular area and the establishment of a sovereign, independent state or governing authority. The region that encompasses present-day Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza historically saw different ruling powers, including the ancient Hebrews, various empires, like the Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman empires, and, later, British control under a mandate from the League of Nations. Throughout these historical periods, there wasn't a specifically sovereign Palestinian state or centralized Palestinian governance in the modern sense until more recent efforts toward Palestinian self-determination and national identity emerged in the 20th century. So while Palestinians have historically inhabited the land for centuries and contributed significantly to its cultural and social makeup, the absence of a distinct, sovereign Palestinian state until recent times is an important distinction when considering the region's historical governance and political structures. I'm confused. You said Palestinians historically refers to the various peoples who have inhabited the region known as Palestine. Explain these people groups and from when they inhabited the land and what their influence on the land was. Certainly, let's delve into some of the historical peoples who have inhabited the region known as Palestine. It's important to note that the historical record is complex and spans thousands of years, so the following overview provides a simplified perspective. 1. Canaanites. The Canaanites were among the earliest known inhabitants of the region, dating back to at least the Bronze Age, circa 3300–1200 BCE. They were a Semitic-speaking people and established city-states throughout the area. The city of Jericho, for example, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world and is associated with Canaanite history. 2. Israelites/Hebrews. The Israelites, later known as the Hebrews, emerged as a distinct group in the ancient Near East. According to biblical accounts, they settled in the region around the 2nd millennium BCE. The Kingdom of Israel and the Kingdom of Judah were two major political entities established by the Israelites. Jerusalem became a central religious and political center for the Hebrews. 3. Assyrians and Babylonians. The Assyrian and Babylonian empires conquered the region in the 8th and 6th centuries BCE, respectively, leading to the destruction of the Kingdom of Israel and later the Kingdom of Judah. The Babylonian exile marked a significant event in Jewish history. 4. Persians. The Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great, conquered the region in the 6th century BCE. Under Persian rule, some Jews were allowed to return and rebuild the Second Temple in Jerusalem. 5. Hellenistic and Roman periods. The conquests of Alexander the Great brought Hellenistic influence to the region. Later, the Romans took control, and Judea became a Roman province. The destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE during the First Jewish-Roman War was a pivotal event. 6. Byzantine Empire. After the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire took control, and Christianity became the dominant religion in the area. 7. Islamic Caliphates. In the 7th century, the Arab-Muslim conquest led to the establishment of the Islamic Caliphates in the region. Jerusalem became a significant city in Islamic history. 8. Crusader period. The Crusaders captured Jerusalem in the 11th century during the First Crusade, establishing Latin Christian rule in the region. 9. Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire took control in the early 16th century and ruled the area until the end of World War I. Throughout these periods, various peoples and cultures have contributed to the development of the region. The mix of influences, including Canaanite, Hebrew, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, and others, has shaped the diverse cultural and historical landscape of Palestine over the centuries. So Palestine refers to a mix of groups, not a particular people group, and no people called the Palestinians ever ruled the land historically. The term Palestine historically refers to the geographic region rather than a specific ethnic or national identity. The region has been home to a mix of diverse peoples throughout history, as outlined previously. The modern conception of a distinct Palestinian national identity began to take shape more prominently in the 20th century. While there wasn't a sovereign state known as Palestine in ancient or medieval times, the area was inhabited by various groups, including Canaanites, Israelites, Philistines, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, and others, who contributed to the cultural and historical tapestry of the region. The emergence of a specifically Palestinian national identity, distinct from other ethnic or religious identities in the area, occurred gradually in response to political changes, shared experiences, and aspirations for self-determination in the 20th century. So, while no historically independent Palestinian state existed in the manner of some other ancient civilizations, the Palestinian identity, as it is understood today, is tied to the region's historical inhabitants and the collective experiences of the people living in the area over time. Okay. If Palestine is a people group, can you provide me historically an overview throughout history of people in the land of Palestine who identified as Palestinians? The historical identity of Palestinians as a distinct people group has evolved over time, and the modern concept of a Palestinian national identity began to take shape more prominently in the 20th century. Prior to that, the inhabitants of the region now known as Palestine often identified along religious, ethnic, or local affiliations rather than a singular national identity. Before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the area known as Palestine was home to a diverse population that included Arabs, Jews, Christians, and others. The term Palestinian was used broadly to describe the inhabitants of the region, without necessarily implying a distinct national identity in the modern sense. The emergence of a specifically Palestinian national consciousness gained momentum in the early 20th century, particularly in response to political changes, growing tensions, and aspirations for self-determination. Factors such as Ottoman rule, British control during the Mandate period, increased Jewish immigration, and the Arab-Israeli conflict contributed to the shaping of a Palestinian identity. Throughout the early to mid-20th century, various developments contributed to the crystallization of a Palestinian national identity. 1. British Mandate period. During the British Mandate in Palestine, from 1920 to 1948, there was a growing sense of Palestinian identity among the Arab population in response to increasing Jewish immigration and the rise of nationalist movements. 2. 1920s and 1930s, Palestinian national sentiment grew amid tensions with Jewish communities and resistance to British rule. The Arab Revolt of 1936–1939, a widespread uprising against British policies and Jewish immigration, further solidified a sense of Palestinian identity. 3. 1948 Arab-Israeli War and Palestinian exodus. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 led to a significant exodus of Palestinians from areas that became part of Israel. This event, known to Palestinians as the Nakba catastrophe, deeply influenced Palestinian identity and collective memory. 4. Post-1948 developments. Following the Nakba, the Palestinian diaspora spread across various countries, contributing to the forging of a common Palestinian narrative and identity. Palestinian leaders, intellectuals, and activists played a role in fostering a cohesive sense of Palestinian nationalism. Since then, the Palestinian national identity has continued to evolve, shaped by experiences of displacement, occupation, resistance, and efforts toward statehood. Today, Palestinians identify with a shared history, culture, and aspirations for self-determination within the land they historically inhabited. You've only listed from 1920. Please provide me some history before 1920. Can you provide me a list of famous Palestinians from the 19th century, for example? Certainly. Before the 20th century, the region now known as Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. The concept of a distinct Palestinian national identity had not fully crystallized, and people often identified more closely with their religious or local affiliations rather than a singular national identity. In the 19th century, notable figures from the region that encompasses present-day Palestine included 1. Baha'u'llah, 1817–1892, born in Tehran, Baha'u'llah was the founder of the Baha'i faith. He was exiled by the Ottoman Empire and spent a significant portion of his life in Palestine, particularly in the area of Acre, where he was imprisoned. His teachings and writings form the basis of the Baha'i faith. 2. Yusuf Daya al-Khalidi, 1829–1906. Al-Khalidi was a notable Palestinian politician and intellectual during the late Ottoman period. He served as the mayor of Jerusalem and was involved in efforts to modernize the city. He was also part of the opposition to the sale of lands to Jewish buyers in the late 19th century. 3. Sheikh Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, 1882–1935. While he lived into the 20th century, al-Qassam was a prominent Islamic preacher and nationalist figure in the late Ottoman period. He became a symbol of resistance against British and Zionist interests in Palestine and inspired anti-colonial sentiments. 4. Khalil al-Sakakini, 1878–1953. A notable educator, writer, and nationalist figure, al-Sakakini was known for his writings and efforts to modernize Palestinian education during the late Ottoman and British Mandate periods. He advocated for Arab nationalism and cultural revival. 5. Hannah Ibrahim and Ibrahim Tukan, both were poets and literary figures known for their contributions to Arabic literature in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Their works reflected Palestinian cultural themes and sentiments of the time. These individuals were influential in their respective fields and contributed to the cultural, intellectual, and political landscape of the region during the late Ottoman period, setting the stage for the later development of Palestinian national consciousness and identity in the 20th century. Before the 19th century, the region of Palestine, encompassing areas that are now part of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, was part of various empires and experienced a rich history intertwined with different cultures, rulers, and religious influences. However, specific records of individual Palestinians or figures directly associated with a distinct Palestinian national identity are less prevalent due to the nature of historical documentation. Here are a few historical aspects and figures tied to the region. 1. Biblical figures. The region's history is deeply intertwined with biblical narratives, which mention figures such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the prophets who played significant roles in the stories associated with the land that would later become known as Palestine. 2. Byzantine period. During the Byzantine era, 4th to 7th centuries CE, the region witnessed Christian influence, with the construction of churches and the establishment of Christian communities. Saints such as George of Lyre, Saint George, were venerated in the region. 3. Islamic conquests. With the Islamic conquests in the 7th century, Arab-Muslim rule began in the region. Jerusalem gained importance as a religious and cultural center in Islam. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque were constructed during this period. 4. Mamluk and Ottoman periods. From the 13th century onward, the region was under Mamluk and later Ottoman rule. The Ottoman era, from the 16th century onward, marked an extended period of stability and relative peace. Palestinian society during this time consisted of diverse religious and ethnic communities. Throughout these periods, the inhabitants of the region, while not necessarily identified as a distinct Palestinian national group, had cultural, social, and economic ties to the land. However, historical documentation often focused more broadly on the region's rulers, religious institutions, and significant events rather than specific individuals associated with a cohesive Palestinian identity as understood in modern times. These aren't self-identified Palestinians though, are they? Can you give me some? Same question. In terms of individuals self-identifying explicitly as Palestinians before the 19th century, direct historical records or accounts using the term Palestinian in a national or ethnic context are limited due to the evolving nature of national identities and the way people identified themselves historically. Before the emergence of modern national identities, people in the region often identified with their religious, tribal, or regional affiliations rather than a distinct Palestinian national identity. The concept of a unified Palestinian identity started to take shape more prominently in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. However, there were individuals living in the region who were part of the diverse fabric of its society. 1. Peasants and townspeople. The majority of the population in historical Palestine were peasants, artisans, traders, and townspeople who lived and worked in the region. They had ties to the land and were part of the social and economic structure of their communities. 2. Religious scholars and figures. Throughout history, the region was home to scholars, theologians, and religious figures associated with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These individuals contributed to religious teachings and the cultural and intellectual life of the area. 3. Local leaders and notables. Within towns and villages, there were local leaders, landowners, and figures of influence who played roles in community affairs, governance, and social cohesion. While specific historical records of individuals self-identifying explicitly as Palestinians before the emergence of modern nationalism might be scarce, the inhabitants of the region contributed to its rich historical, cultural, and social tapestry. The evolution of a distinct Palestinian national identity occurred gradually, influenced by various socio-political developments and external factors in the 20th century. Can you give me a list of famous Jews who lived in Palestine before the 19th century? Certainly. Before the 19th century, the region now known as Palestine had a diverse population that included Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Here are a few figures from Jewish history who were associated with the region. 1. Maimonides. Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, 12th century, a renowned Jewish philosopher, scholar, and physician. Maimonides lived in Spain and Egypt but visited Jerusalem. He authored influential philosophical and legal works, including the Mishneh Torah and the Guide for the Perplexed. 2. Nachmanides. Rabbi Moses ben Naaman, 13th century, a leading medieval Jewish scholar. Nachmanides was a biblical commentator and Talmudic authority. He lived in Spain and later settled in Jerusalem, where he actively participated in the Jewish community. 3. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, 12th century, a Jewish mystical leader and scholar. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid moved to Jerusalem from Germany and founded a group of Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants. He was known for his pious teachings and the establishment of a Jewish community in Jerusalem. 4. Rabbi Avadia of Bartenura, 15th century, a commentator on the Mishnah. Rabbi Avadia of Bartenura lived in Jerusalem during the 15th century. He was known for his scholarly works and contributions to Jewish legal interpretations. 5. Rabbi Joseph Caro, 16th century, a leading Sephardic rabbi and author of the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Joseph Caro lived in Safed, a town in the Galilee region of historic Palestine. He played a significant role in Jewish legal scholarship. These individuals were prominent Jewish figures who lived in or had connections to the region of historic Palestine before the 19th century. Their contributions to Jewish thought, scholarship, and religious life left a lasting impact on Jewish history and culture in the area. Can you give me a full list with just names and dates, not including the ones above? Certainly. Here's a list of some notable Jews who lived in Palestine before the 19th century. 1. Rabbi Yehuda HaNazi, Judah the Prince, 135 to 217 CE. 2. Rabbi Akiva, 50 to 135 CE. 3. Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, 1st century CE. 4. Bar Kokhba, Simon Bar Kokhba, 132 to 136 CE. 5. Rabbi Gamaliel II, 2nd century CE. 6. Rabbi Hillel the Elder, 110 BCE 10 CE. 7. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, 2nd century CE. 8. Rabbi Ma, 2nd century CE. 9. Rabbi Yehuda HaLevi, 1075 to 1141. 10. Rabbi Nachmanides, Moses ben Naaman, 1194 to 1270. These figures played significant roles in Jewish history, scholarship, and religious life in the region of historic Palestine before the 19th century. Absolutely. Here are a few more notable figures. 1. Rabbi Moses ben Jacob Cordovero, 1522 to 1570. 2. Rabbi Isaac Luria, Ha'ari, 1534 to 1572. 3. Rabbi Moses Issels, Ramah, 1520 to 1572. 4. Rabbi Yaakov Beirut, 1474 to 1546. 5. Rabbi Moses Al-Sheikh, 1508 to 1600. 6. Rabbi Elijah Balshem of Chelm, 1550 to 1583. 7. Rabbi Elijah Mizrahi, 1455 to 1525. 8. Rabbi David ben Solomon ibn Abi Zimra, Rabbus, 1479 to 1573. 9. Rabbi Bezalel Ashkenazi, 1520 to 1591. 10. Rabbi Shlomo ben Yosef Molcho, 1500 to 1532. These individuals contributed to Jewish thought, mysticism, law, and religious life in the historic region of Palestine, leaving a lasting impact on Jewish scholarship and tradition. Certainly, here are a few additional notable figures from Jewish history in Palestine before the 19th century. 1. Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, 1089 to 1167. 2. Rabbi Yehuda he Hasid, 12th century. 3. Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid, 993-1056. 4. Rabbi Saadia Gaon, 882 to 942. 5. Rabbi Yitzhak ben Sheshet Pafeh, 1326 to 1408. 6. Rabbi Yosef Karo, 1488 to 1575. 7. Rabbi Yosef ben Ephraim Karo, the Bias Yosef, 1488 to 1575. 8. Rabbi Yosef Karo, 1488 to 1575. 9. Rabbi Moses ben Jacob of Kausi, 13th century. 10. Rabbi Yom Tov Savili, Ritva, 1250 to 1330. These individuals were influential in various fields of Jewish scholarship, philosophy, law, and mysticism, contributing significantly to the rich tapestry of Jewish intellectual and religious life in historic Palestine. Of course, here are a few more notable Jewish figures associated with historic Palestine before the 19th century. 1. Rabbi Isaac ibn Giyat, 11th century. 2. Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg, 1215 to 1293. 3. Rabbi Joseph ben Ephraim Karo, 1488 to 1575. 4. Rabbi Menachem Mui, 1249 to 1315. 5. Rabbi Yosef ibn Magash, 1077 to 1141. 6. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Ramkel, 1707 to 1746. 7. Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, 1092 to 1167. 8. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Maimonites/Rambam, 1135 to 1204. 9. Rabbi Abraham ibn Dord, 1110 to 1180. 10. Rabbi Yitzhak ben Yosef of Korbeil, 13th century. These individuals made significant contributions to Jewish philosophy, law, mysticism, and religious thought, leaving a lasting legacy within the historic context of Palestine. Oh, so quite a few then. How many would you say in total? Would be hundreds, thousands or tens of thousands or even millions. In terms of notable figures from Jewish history associated with historic Palestine before the 19th century, the total number doesn't reach the scale of hundreds of thousands, let alone millions. It's important to understand that the individuals listed represent prominent scholars, leaders, and influential figures within the Jewish community of that time. Considering the limited historical records and the context of the population size during different periods in history, the total number of such individuals directly associated with historic Palestine would likely be in the range of dozens to potentially a few hundred at most. These individuals were notable for their contributions to Jewish thought, law, mysticism, and religious life in the region during those times. I'm confused. Just dozens of Jews lived in Palestine before the 19th century and no people who self-identify as Palestinians. Apologies for any confusion. The number of notable figures listed represents significant Jewish scholars and figures associated with historic Palestine, not the entirety of the Jewish population in the region. The figures listed were influential individuals whose works and contributions have been documented and remembered throughout history. The actual population of Jews in historic Palestine before the 19th century was likely larger than just a few dozen individuals. However, specific historical records regarding the total population size and the identities of individuals during that time are more limited due to the nature of historical documentation. Regarding Palestinians self-identifying as such before the 19th century, the development of a distinct Palestinian national identity, as understood in the modern sense, was a gradual process that gained momentum in the 20th century. Before that, people in the region often identified with various affiliations, such as religious, tribal, or regional identities, rather than a unified Palestinian national identity. The concept of a specifically Palestinian national identity began to emerge more prominently in response to political changes and social developments in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Okay, so can you give me an overview of numbers of different groups who lived in the area known as Palestine in the 19th century? In the 19th century, the region known as Palestine, which encompassed areas that are now part of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, was home to a diverse population comprising various religious, ethnic, and cultural groups. While exact population figures can be challenging to ascertain due to limited historical records and differing estimations, here's an overview of the major groups present in the area during that time. 1. Muslim Arabs. The majority population in the region consisted of Muslim Arabs, including various tribal groups and urban dwellers. They had lived in the area for centuries and were primarily engaged in agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. 2. Jews. There was a Jewish presence in Palestine throughout history, though the population varied over time. In the 19th century, there was a smaller Jewish community, primarily concentrated in Jerusalem, Safed, Hebron, and a few other towns. They were involved in religious studies, trade, and crafts. 3. Christians. Christian communities, including various denominations such as Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian, and others, existed in historic Palestine. They lived in cities like Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, and others, and were engaged in religious activities, trade, and agriculture. 4. Druze. In the mountainous areas of Galilee and the Carmel region, there was a Druze community. The Druze practiced a unique religion and were known for their agricultural activities. 5. Bedouins. Nomadic or semi-nomadic Bedouin tribes inhabited the desert and semi-arid regions. They were traditionally engaged in herding, agriculture, and trade. 6. Circassians. Small Circassian communities, originally from the Caucasus, settled in the northern part of historic Palestine, mainly in the Galilee region. 7. Other minorities. There were smaller communities of Samaritans, Kurds, and others living in specific areas, though their numbers were relatively limited. Each of these groups had its own cultural, religious, and social practices, contributing to the diverse tapestry of historic Palestine in the 19th century. The population makeup and interactions between these groups varied across different regions and towns within the area. Wow, so it seems like you are saying in the 19th century Palestine was inhabited by a multitude of different groups. Can you explain why this is so diverse? The diversity of groups in 19th century Palestine can be attributed to several historical, geographical, and socio-cultural factors. 1. Geographical crossroads. The region historically known as Palestine was a crossroads between Africa, Asia, and Europe. Its location facilitated trade routes and interactions among various civilizations, leading to a mixture of cultures, languages, and ethnicities. 2. Historical conquests and settlements. Throughout history, the region saw the rise and fall of different empires, including the Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Arab Muslims, Crusaders, Mamluks, and Ottomans. Each conquering empire brought its own influences and populations, contributing to the diverse ethnic and religious landscape. 3. Religious significance. The region holds deep religious significance for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It attracted followers and pilgrims from these faiths, leading to the establishment of religious communities and institutions. 4. Migration and settlement. People migrated to Palestine for various reasons, including economic opportunities, religious pilgrimage, fleeing persecution, or seeking refuge. This influx of diverse populations led to settlements and the establishment of communities. 5. Agricultural and trade centers. Cities like Jerusalem, Nazareth, Hebron, and Safed served as centers of religious, cultural, and economic activities, attracting people from different backgrounds who contributed to the region's diversity. 6. Nomadic and semi-nomadic groups. Bedouin tribes roamed the desert and semi-arid regions, while Druze and Circassians settled in specific areas, maintaining their distinct cultural practices. 7. Ottoman rule. The Ottoman Empire's administration of the region allowed for a certain level of autonomy within communities. This enabled various religious and ethnic groups to maintain their traditions and cultural practices. The combination of these historical and geographical factors contributed to the rich mosaic of diverse groups living in Palestine in the 19th century. This diversity was a result of centuries of interactions, migrations, conquests, and settlement patterns that shaped the social fabric of the region. So pure multiculturalism it sounds like, would that be correct? Absolutely, that's a fitting way to describe it. The historical context of Palestine in the 19th century indeed reflects a form of multiculturalism characterized by the coexistence of diverse ethnicities, religions, languages, and traditions within the same geographical space. It was a mosaic of cultures where different groups maintained their distinct identities, practices, and beliefs while interacting and often living in proximity to one another. This multicultural environment emerged from centuries of historical interactions, migrations, and the convergence of various civilizations in the region. The coexistence of multiple ethnic, religious, and cultural communities in Palestine during that time created a vibrant tapestry of diversity, contributing to the richness of the region's history and heritage. Is this still true today in what is known as Israel? Contemporary Israel remains a diverse and multicultural society, though the dynamics have evolved significantly since the 19th century. Israel is home to a wide range of ethnicities, religions, and cultural backgrounds, contributing to its diverse societal fabric. Here's an overview. 1. Jewish population. The majority of Israel's population identifies as Jewish, but within this majority, there is diversity in cultural and religious practices, including Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform Judaism, as well as secular Jews. 2. Arab population. Israeli Arabs, comprising primarily Muslim, Christian, and Druze communities, constitute a significant minority. They have Israeli citizenship and are an integral part of the country's social, cultural, and political landscape. 3. Other minorities. Israel is also home to smaller minority groups such as Bedouins, Circassians, Samaritans, and smaller ethnic communities with their own cultural and religious practices. 4. Immigrant communities. Israel has absorbed immigrants from various countries, contributing to its multiculturalism. These include Jewish immigrants from Europe, North America, Ethiopia, the former Soviet Union, North Africa, and the Middle East, each bringing their unique cultural backgrounds. 5. Religious diversity. Jerusalem, in particular, is a focal point of religious diversity, hosting significant sites for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The city's diverse religious communities contribute to its cultural richness. However, it's important to note that Israel, like any multicultural society, faces challenges related to intergroup relations, integration, and social cohesion. Tensions and disparities exist, particularly between Jewish and Arab communities, as well as among various Jewish denominations and ethnic groups. Issues such as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, societal integration, cultural differences, and political tensions shape the dynamics within Israel's multicultural framework. While efforts toward coexistence and mutual understanding persist, complexities and differences in perspectives remain significant factors in contemporary Israeli society. Gaza, a densely populated coastal strip, is home to a predominantly Palestinian population. Unlike Israel, Gaza's demographic makeup is more homogeneous, primarily consisting of Palestinian Arabs, predominantly Sunni Muslims. Here's an overview. 1. Palestinian population. Gaza is part of the Palestinian territories and is populated predominantly by Palestinian Arabs. It has a high population density, with a majority living in urban areas. 2. Refugee population. A significant portion of Gaza's population consists of Palestinian refugees and their descendants, who were displaced during the Arab-Israeli conflict and subsequent wars. Many reside in refugee camps within Gaza. 3. Minority groups. While Palestinians in Gaza are predominantly Sunni Muslims, there are small Christian and other minority communities present. However, their numbers are comparatively small. 4. Socio-political context. Gaza has been under the control of Hamas, an Islamist political and militant group, since 2007. This governance has had a significant impact on the social, cultural, and political dynamics within the territory. Gaza's social fabric has been significantly affected by ongoing political tensions, the Israeli blockade, economic challenges, and periodic conflicts with Israel. These factors have shaped the socio-economic landscape and cultural dynamics within the Gaza Strip. While Gaza's population is more homogeneous compared to Israel, it still exhibits internal diversity in terms of social, economic, and political perspectives. However, the focus on daily challenges related to the political situation and socio-economic struggles often plays a dominant role in shaping the cultural and social dynamics within Gaza. As of my last knowledge update in January 2022, the Jewish population in the Gaza Strip is extremely small, nearly non-existent. Following the disengagement plan of 2005, Israel dismantled all Jewish settlements in Gaza, and the Israeli civilian and military presence was entirely withdrawn from the territory. Consequently, the Jewish population in Gaza is minimal, if any. The withdrawal from Gaza was part of Israel's unilateral disengagement from the territory, aiming to remove Israeli settlements and military installations as well as the evacuation of Jewish residents living there. Since then, Gaza has been under the control of Hamas, an Islamist organization, and has been predominantly inhabited by Palestinian Arabs. Any recent updates or changes in demographics within Gaza regarding the Jewish population would need to be verified with current and credible sources, as demographic figures can change over time due to various factors. As of my last update, the Jewish population in the West Bank, also known as Judea and Samaria, exists alongside the Palestinian population but is a minority within this territory. The exact numbers may have changed, but the Jewish population in the West Bank consists of Israeli settlers living in communities known as settlements. Estimates indicate several 100,000 Israeli settlers live in the West Bank, particularly in communities that range from small outposts to larger cities. These settlements are considered by much of the international community to be illegal under international law, though Israel disputes this interpretation. The settlement issue remains a contentious topic in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israeli settlements, infrastructure, and security measures in the West Bank have significant implications for the territorial, political, and social dynamics within the region, impacting the prospects for a future Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. The majority of the West Bank's population is Palestinian, living in cities, towns, and villages across the territory. The settlements are dispersed throughout the West Bank, and their presence affects the socio-political landscape and ongoing peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. In addition to the Jewish and Palestinian populations, the West Bank is home to various minority groups, though their numbers might be comparatively smaller. These groups contribute to the cultural and ethnic diversity within the region. 1. Bedouins, nomadic or semi-nomadic Bedouin communities reside in parts of the West Bank, primarily in the Jordan Valley and areas with open spaces. They traditionally engage in herding and agriculture. 2. Druze, while the Druze population is more concentrated in northern Israel, there are also Druze communities in the West Bank, particularly in areas like the town of Abu Ghosh. 3. Christian communities, various Christian denominations, including Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and others, have a presence in the West Bank. Bethlehem, for example, holds significant religious importance for Christians and is home to a sizable Christian population. 4. Other minority groups, there might be smaller communities belonging to different ethnic backgrounds or religious affiliations living in specific areas of the West Bank. However, their numbers might not significantly impact the overall demographic composition. The West Bank's population is predominantly Palestinian, but the presence of these minority groups contributes to the region's cultural diversity. Each group maintains its distinct cultural practices, traditions, and social structures within the context of the broader Palestinian society. Are there any Palestinians in other countries in the Middle East? Yes, Palestinian communities can be found in various countries across the Middle East and beyond. 1. Lebanon. Lebanon hosts a significant Palestinian refugee population, many of whom have been residing in refugee camps since the creation of Israel in 1948 and subsequent conflicts. Palestinian refugees in Lebanon face socio-economic challenges and limited rights. 2. Jordan. Jordan has a substantial Palestinian population, including refugees and their descendants from the 1948 and 1967 conflicts. Palestinians in Jordan have integrated into society to various extents and contribute significantly to the country's socio-economic fabric. 3. Syria. Syria was home to a Palestinian refugee population before the Syrian civil war. Palestinian refugees lived in camps and cities, however, the conflict has led to displacement and challenges for this community. 4. Gulf states. Countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates also have Palestinian communities, often consisting of professionals, expatriates, and workers who migrated for employment opportunities. 5. Other Arab and Middle Eastern countries. Palestinian communities can be found in other countries in the region, with varying degrees of size and integration into society. Palestinian diaspora communities in these countries often have different legal statuses, access to rights, and integration levels, influenced by historical circumstances and the policies of the host countries. Their presence contributes to the cultural, social, and economic diversity of these nations. Okay, so are you saying in the Middle East outside Israel that Palestinians experience a lack of rights? The rights and conditions of Palestinians living in different Middle Eastern countries vary based on their legal status, host country policies, and historical circumstances. While some Palestinian communities have integrated well and have access to certain rights and opportunities, others, especially Palestinian refugees, may face challenges and limitations. 1. Refugee camps. Palestinian refugees living in camps, particularly in Lebanon and Syria, often face socio-economic challenges, limited access to certain professions, and restricted rights compared to the general population. They are sometimes excluded from certain professions or rights granted to citizens. 2. Citizenship and legal rights. In some countries, Palestinians might have legal residency but not citizenship, impacting their access to social services, employment opportunities, and political participation. 3. Integration. Palestinians in countries like Jordan have historically integrated into society to a greater extent, with many holding citizenship and participating in various aspects of public life. They contribute significantly to Jordan's economic and cultural landscape. 4. Social and economic challenges. In certain cases, Palestinians may face discrimination or limitations in employment, education, and other areas due to their status or origin. It's important to note that the experiences of Palestinians in different countries across the Middle East vary significantly based on historical context, legal frameworks, and policies established by host governments. While some Palestinians enjoy relatively good living standards and rights in certain countries, others, especially refugees living in camps, may face more significant socio-economic challenges and limited access to rights and opportunities. Do the Palestinians who reside inside Israel have a better quality of life and more rights than these do? The situation of Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, often referred to as Arab citizens of Israel, differs from that of Palestinians living in other Middle Eastern countries, particularly those who are refugees. Palestinian citizens of Israel have Israeli citizenship and enjoy legal rights and freedoms guaranteed by Israeli law. They have the right to vote, participate in the political process, and hold positions in the Knesset, Israeli parliament, and other governmental institutions. They also have access to Israeli healthcare, education, and social services. However, despite being citizens, Palestinian Israelis face some challenges and disparities compared to the Jewish population. 1. Socio-economic disparities. Palestinian citizens of Israel often face socio-economic inequalities compared to Jewish Israelis. They generally have lower average incomes, higher rates of unemployment, and fewer economic opportunities. 2. Land and housing issues. Palestinian communities within Israel sometimes encounter challenges related to land and housing rights, such as difficulties in obtaining building permits and land allocation. This can lead to issues of overcrowding and inadequate infrastructure in some Palestinian towns and villages. 3. Cultural and political identity. Palestinian citizens of Israel sometimes grapple with questions of cultural identity and integration within a state that has a Jewish national character. Some feel marginalized or excluded from certain aspects of the state due to their Palestinian identity. While Palestinian citizens of Israel have legal rights and participate in the Israeli democratic process, socio-economic disparities and challenges in areas such as land rights and cultural recognition remain significant issues within Israeli society. The experiences and perspectives of Palestinian citizens of Israel are diverse and nuanced, reflecting both their Israeli citizenship and their Palestinian identity. Okay, that's interesting. So generally speaking they do. Yes or no, and please stick to one-word answer. Wow, you wouldn't think that given what's reported on the news. Why is that? The situation is complex due to various historical, social, and political factors that impact the lives of Palestinian citizens of Israel. While they have legal rights as citizens, socio-economic disparities and issues related to identity and land can contribute to challenges and perceptions of inequality within Israeli society. Media coverage often highlights these complexities, shaping public perception. No, I mean on the news. Why don't I already know that? News coverage often focuses on particular events, conflicts, or sensationalized stories that garner attention. The nuanced realities of minority groups within a society, including their rights and challenges, might not receive as much prominent coverage. Additionally, media narratives can sometimes oversimplify complex issues, leading to an incomplete understanding of the lived experiences of minority communities like Palestinian citizens of Israel and Palestinian citizens in other Arab, Muslim and Middle East countries, right? Can you repeat answer within this context? The complexities of Palestinian communities in other Arab, Muslim, and Middle Eastern countries might not receive extensive coverage in the news. Media often spotlight particular events or conflicts, overlooking the nuanced realities and challenges faced by these communities within various host countries. This limited coverage contributes to a lack of widespread awareness about the experiences and rights of Palestinians outside of Israel. The term Palestine has ancient origins and has been used to refer to the geographic region roughly corresponding to the area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. The name Palestine dates back to ancient times. The term's etymology traces back to the ancient Greek word Palestine, which was used by the Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BCE to describe the area inhabited by the Philistines, an ancient people who settled along the southern coast of the Levant. The Philistines were one of several groups in the region, and their presence gave rise to the name Palestine in historical texts. Throughout history, the term Palestine was used by various civilizations, including the Romans, Byzantines, and Ottomans, to describe the broader geographic area that encompassed the region later known as Palestine under British mandate in the 20th century. The use and significance of the term Palestine have evolved over time, and it holds considerable historical, cultural, and geopolitical significance in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and discussions about the region's identity and sovereignty. Yes, that's correct. The term Palestine has connections to the ancient Hebrew term, pronounced Pelishtim or Pelishtin, which refers to the Philistines, an ancient people who inhabited the southern coastal region of the Levant. The Philistines were among the various groups living in the area during ancient times and contributed to the naming of the region that eventually became known as Palestine. The root word, pronounced Palamshin, in Hebrew is the root of various words related to the Philistines, an ancient people historically associated with the coastal region of the southern Levant. This root is primarily linked to the Philistines and their identity. The word, pronounced Pelishti, refers to a Philistine person or someone associated with the Philistine people. It's a term used to denote someone from the ancient Philistine community or descendants thereof. The term, pronounced Peleshet, is the Hebrew word for Philistia, the land associated with the Philistines in ancient times. Outside of biblical sources, the term or its derivatives in Hebrew, related to the Philistines, might not have direct usage or explicit meanings in contemporary language or non-biblical historical texts. In modern Hebrew, these terms primarily retain their historical significance related to the Philistines, but their everyday usage might not be prevalent or directly applicable in modern contexts. These terms, while originating from ancient roots associated with the Philistines, may not have widespread or explicit meanings in contemporary non-biblical texts or everyday language outside of historical or archaeological discussions referring to ancient history or the biblical narrative. Their usage is often specific to historical or cultural contexts discussing ancient peoples and their historical significance in the region. Quote references for Strong's H6428, which is the root word for Palestine/Philistine. Strong's H6428 refers to the Hebrew word, pronounced Pelishti, and is commonly associated with the Philistines in the Old Testament. This term is often used to denote a member of the Philistine people or someone associated with the ancient Philistine community. Here are a few references to the term in the Old Testament. 1. Genesis 10:14, Pathruzim, Casluim, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorim. 2. Exodus 13:17, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. 3. 1 Samuel 17:1, now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. These verses are some examples of where the term, Pelishti, is used in the Old Testament to refer to the Philistines. Apologies for the confusion earlier. The root word you mentioned, pronounced Peilamshin, is not commonly used in the Hebrew Bible as an independent word. It serves as the root from which words associated with the Philistines, such as Pelishti, Philistine, and Peleshet, Philistia, are derived. The root itself doesn't appear as an independent word or term in biblical texts. Instead, its derivatives are used to denote the Philistines or their land. In Jeremiah 6:26-27, NIV, the root word related to the Philistines, which is Peleshet, Philistia, is not present. However, I can assist in emphasizing the words in the specified verses. Verse 26. Put on sackcloth, my people, and roll in ashes, mourn with bitter wailing as for an only son, mourning bitterly for him who. Verse 27. For this is what the Lord says, the whole land will be ruined, though I will not destroy it completely. Apologies, the term directly related to the root is not found in these verses. In Jeremiah 6:26-27, the specific root word related to the Philistines, Philistia, does not appear. However, I'll highlight the specified verses, indicating the original Hebrew. Verse 26. Put on sackcloth, my people, and roll in ashes, mourn with bitter wailing as for an only son, mourning bitterly for him who. Jeremiah 6:26. Verse 27. For this is what the Lord says, the whole land will be ruined, though I will not destroy it completely. Jeremiah 6:27. Certainly, the phrase and roll in ashes in Hebrew from Jeremiah 6:26 is pronounced Betokachiretz. Confused what is then? I apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. The phrase, pronounced Vihit Palshivarifa, from Jeremiah 6:26 translates to and roll in ashes or and cover yourself in dust in English. Yes, the phrase, Vihit Palshi, contains the root letters, Plsha, which are part of the root word associated with the Philistines, Philistia. In this context, the verb form used is derived from the same root, although it refers to the action of rolling in ashes rather than specifically indicating the Philistines themselves. But the word comes from the root word which means roll if you understand Hebrew linguistics. Absolutely, you're correct. The Hebrew root, Plsha, is associated with the idea of rolling or covering oneself, and it is the same root that is used to form both the term for the Philistines, Philistia, and the verb, Vihit Palshi, which in this context means and roll oneself in ashes or cover oneself in dust. The linguistic connection within Hebrew roots allows for different words and verb forms to share a similar underlying meaning or concept. The linguistic connection between the Hebrew root, Plsha, which signifies rolling or covering, is interesting in terms of its diverse applications in Hebrew. The root, Plsha, forms the basis for various words and concepts. 1. Philistia refers to the ancient land of the Philistines. 2. Vihit Palshi means and roll oneself in ashes or cover oneself in dust. While refers to the geographical area of Philistia, the verb form carries the concept of rolling or covering oneself, specifically in the context of mourning or lamentation. The linguistic connection underscores how Hebrew roots can extend across various words, forming related concepts that might share a common underlying meaning or idea. In this case, the root's association with rolling or covering is evident in both the term for the Philistines and the action described in the context of mourning. Does this then mean the actual word Palestine comes from the Hebrew language? The term Palestine has ancient origins and is not directly derived from Hebrew. It originated from the ancient Greek term Palestine, which was used to refer to the region corresponding roughly to the area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. While the Hebrew language has a term for the ancient land of the Philistines, namely, pronounced Peleshet or Pelishtim for Philistia or Philistines, respectively, the term Palestine itself is primarily associated with its usage in ancient Greek and later adopted into various languages, including English. The name Palestine became more prevalent in English and other languages after the Roman Empire renamed the region as Provincia Syria Palestina in the 2nd century AD, following the Bar Kokhba revolt, to dissociate the area from Jewish historical ties. This usage continued through history, and the term Palestine is widely recognized today as the name for the region. While there might be some linguistic connections or historical associations, the direct origin of the term Palestine is rooted in ancient Greek and later historical usage rather than the Hebrew language. Can you find an early source for the Greek word then? The term Palestine, in ancient Greek, was used to refer to the region known as Palestine. One of the earliest documented instances of this term can be found in the writings of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, often referred to as the father of history. Herodotus lived in the 5th century BCE and mentioned the term Palestine in his historical works. However, it's important to note that Herodotus didn't extensively discuss the region itself but rather referenced the areas and people within it within the broader context of his historical accounts. While Herodotus is a notable early source mentioning the term Palestine, other ancient texts and historical documents also make references to the region and its name, contributing to the understanding of the usage of the term in ancient times. Okay, can you date the earliest reference from the Torah? The Torah, the central reference text of Judaism, contains geographical references to the land that later became known as Palestine. However, it's important to note that the term Palestine itself, as it's recognized in historical and modern contexts, doesn't explicitly appear in the Torah. The Torah primarily refers to the region as the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, or Canaan. It describes the geographical area promised to the Israelites, focusing on its borders, cities, and the tribes that inhabited the land. These references to the land date back to ancient times, believed by scholars to be around the 13th to 6th centuries BCE, but the specific term Palestine as it is known in later history does not appear in the Torah. So which comes first, Herodotus in the first or in the Torah, which you say is between 13th to 6th centuries BCE? The Torah, which dates back to approximately the 13th to 6th centuries BCE, predates Herodotus by a significant margin. The earliest portions of the Torah are believed to have been written well before Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century BCE. The timelines of ancient texts and historical sources often provide intriguing insights into the development and evolution of language, cultures, and civilizations. If you have any more questions or if there's anything specific you'd like to explore further, feel free to ask. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Consider checking important information.